Daddy, if everyone else keeps walking away, does that mean they're right? The question was so small, so innocent, that it disappeared beneath the steady chorus of barcode scanners and shopping carts rattling across polished tile. Yet within seconds, it would become the only thing one of the richest men in America could hear. The late afternoon rush filled the Green Valley Market with familiar sounds. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead. Fresh bread drifted from the bakery. Somewhere near the entrance, a toddler laughed while balloons tugged gently against a shopping cart. It looked like every ordinary Thursday in suburban Ohio. But ordinary moments often hide the quiet decisions that change lives forever. Ethan Brooks adjusted the cuff of his navy blazer as he stepped through the automatic doors with his 8-year-old daughter beside him. At 42, Ethan had built Brooks Capital into one of the country's fastest-growing investment firms. Financial magazines called him brilliant. Business networks admired his discipline. Employees respected his calm leadership. Yet those closest to him knew there had once been another version of Ethan Brooks, one that seemed to disappear the day his wife, Claire, never came home from the hospital. Since then, efficiency had become his shelter. He solved problems. He closed deals. He avoided unnecessary emotion. It was easier that way. Beside him walked Lily Brooks, wearing worn white sneakers, a yellow cardigan, and carrying the same stuffed rabbit she'd refused to replace since kindergarten. Unlike her father, Lily noticed everything. She smiled at strangers. She thanked cashiers before they thanked her. She waved at elderly shoppers she had never met. Somewhere inside her lived the kindness Ethan used to recognize in himself. They gathered only a few groceries. Apples, whole milk, pasta. Lily insisted on adding chocolate chip cookies after promising to share them with the neighbor next door. Ethan smiled faintly, unable to say no. Register 6 was almost empty when they approached. Behind it stood Emma Carter, 27 years old. Neat blue uniform. Blonde hair pulled into a simple ponytail. A plastic name tag rested slightly crooked against her shirt. To everyone else, she looked like another cashier nearing the end of a long shift. But Lily noticed something different first. Emma's smile arrived half a second too late. Her hands trembled as she scanned a loaf of bread. Her eyes looked swollen, as though sleep had abandoned them days ago. Then it happened. A customer impatiently sighed after a coupon failed to scan. Emma apologized softly and tried again. The register froze. The customer rolled his eyes. A supervisor hurried over wearing the tight smile of someone who had forgotten how to be kind. Emma, we've talked about staying focused, he said loud enough for nearby shoppers to hear. People are waiting. I'm sorry, Emma whispered. It won't happen again. She lowered her head, blinking quickly as one tear escaped despite every effort to hide it. The supervisor walked away. The line moved forward. Shopping carts rolled on. Conversations resumed. Most people never even looked up. Ethan reached for his wallet. His receipt printed. Have a nice evening. Emma managed, though her voice barely existed. Ethan nodded politely, accepted the bags, and turned toward the exit. One step, then another. Lily didn't move. Her little hand slipped free from his. She remained standing beside the register, staring at Emma with quiet confusion. Ethan stopped only after realizing his daughter was no longer beside him. He turned. Lily looked up at him, her blue eyes glistening with questions no boardroom could answer. Daddy, she whispered, if Mommy were here, would she keep walking? Ethan looked at his daughter for a long moment without speaking. The sounds of the supermarket faded into something distant, as though the world itself had stepped back to wait for his answer. Lily never demanded explanations. She only asked honest questions, and somehow those were always the hardest ones to answer. His fingers tightened around the grocery bag. He glanced toward Emma again. She had already wiped away the tear with the back of her hand. Another customer had stepped forward, and she forced another smile onto her face. It looked practiced, almost rehearsed, the kind of smile that existed only because giving up was not an option. Ethan remembered another smile like that. Claire had worn it through months of treatments, insisting she was fine even when he knew every step exhausted her. He swallowed quietly. Lily tugged gently on his sleeve. Daddy? She asked again. Ethan released a slow breath. Wait here for just a second. She nodded without saying another word. Ethan turned around. Each step back toward Register 6 felt strangely unfamiliar, not because the distance was long, but because it had been years since he had walked towards someone else's pain without first calculating the cost. Emma was carefully placing canned soup into a paper bag when she noticed him standing there. Her expression immediately shifted into professional courtesy. "Did I forget something in your orders, sir?" she asked softly. Ethan shook his head. "No, everything is here." She offered a tired smile. "I am glad to hear that." An awkward silence settled between them. Nearby, the refrigeration units released a low, steady hum while the coffee grinder from the in-store cafe buzzed faintly across the aisle. Ethan searched for words that did not sound rehearsed or artificial. Finally, he asked the simplest question he could. "Are you all right?" Emma looked startled, almost as if she had forgotten people still asked that question without expecting anything in return. She opened her mouth to answer automatically, then stopped. Her eyes drifted downward toward the register screen. "I will be," she said after several seconds. "Just one of those days." Ethan nodded slowly. "Sometimes those are the hardest ones." She laughed once, quietly, though there was no joy behind it. "You have no idea." Before Ethan could respond, the next customer rolled a shopping cart forward. Emma immediately straightened her shoulders. "Thank you for shopping with us," she said politely, slipping back into the invisible armor she wore every day. Ethan stepped aside, allowing the customer through. He could have left again. In fact, every instinct built from years of board meetings and impossible schedules told him to do exactly that. But Lily was still watching from several feet away. She saw something no quarterly report could measure. She saw someone trying very hard not to fall apart. As the customer walked away, Lily approached quietly. She held her stuffed rabbit close against her chest before looking up at Emma. "My name is Lily," she said with the complete confidence only children possess. Emma blinked in surprise. "Hello, Lily." Lily smiled warmly. "My mommy always said that when people cry, they are usually trying very hard to be brave." Emma's lips trembled. For a second, she could not speak at all. She looked toward the floor, pressing her lips together as another tear threatened to escape. Then she knelt slightly, so her eyes met Lily's. "Your mommy sounds like she was a very wise lady." Lily nodded proudly. "She was." Ethan felt something inside his chest shift, slow and almost imperceptible, like the first crack of sunlight after a long winter. He had spent years protecting himself from grief by keeping the world at arm's length. Yet his daughter, with nothing more than honesty and compassion, had crossed a distance he had been unable to travel alone. Emma remained kneeling for another second before slowly standing again as the next customer placed a basket on the conveyor belt. Her smile returned on command, polite and practiced, but Ethan could now see the tiny cracks beneath it. She scanned fresh vegetables, cereal boxes, and bottled water with careful precision, apologizing when the receipt printer hesitated for a moment. Nothing about her movements suggested laziness or carelessness. If anything, she seemed exhausted from trying too hard. Lily quietly reached for her father's hand. Ethan squeezed it gently while they stepped away from the register to avoid blocking the line. Neither of them spoke until they reached the large front windows overlooking the parking lot, where the golden evening sunlight reflected across rows of parked cars. Lily looked back toward Emma. "She is pretending," she whispered. Ethan nodded almost absent-mindedly. "What makes you think that?" Lily tilted her head. "Because she smiles with her mouth, but not with her eyes. Mommy used to tell me that people can hide tears, but they cannot hide tired." Ethan felt the familiar ache settle inside his chest again. Claire had said those exact words years earlier after volunteering at a neighborhood food pantry. He had forgotten them. Lily had not. Through the glass doors, customers came and went carrying grocery bags, laughing with family members, talking on their phones, planning ordinary evenings at home. Life continued with quiet certainty for most of them. Yet inside the market, behind Register 6, someone was carrying a burden invisible to almost everyone who walked past. Ethan found himself watching Emma instead of checking the time as he normally would. A little boy ran ahead of his mother with a candy bar in his hand. Emma smiled warmly and crouched just enough to hand him a sticker after his mother paid. The child giggled before running toward the exit. For just a heartbeat, Emma's face softened into something genuine. Then she glanced at the small photograph tucked beneath the edge of her register monitor. The smile disappeared. She looked away quickly and resumed scanning groceries. Ethan noticed it immediately. It was only the corner of a picture, barely visible beneath the plastic frame of the monitor, but he could make out the face of a young boy with bright eyes and a baseball cap that looked slightly too large for his head. Emma touched the photograph lightly with one finger before another customer approached. It was such a small gesture that most people would never have noticed it. Ethan did. "Daddy," Lily said softly, following his gaze. "Is that her little boy?" "I think it might be." Lily was quiet for several seconds. Then she asked, "Do you think he knows his mommy cries at work?" Ethan did not answer immediately. The question lingered between them like the last note of a familiar song. Finally he said, "I hope not." At that exact moment the store manager returned, carrying a clipboard tucked beneath one arm. He stopped beside Emma's register and lowered his voice, though not enough to keep nearby customers from hearing. "Emma, I still need you to stay after your shift tonight. We are short-staffed again." Emma hesitated only briefly. "I was supposed to leave by 7. I have to pick up my son." The manager sighed impatiently. "Find someone else to get him. We all have responsibilities." Emma lowered her eyes respectfully. "I understand." "Good," the manager replied before walking away without another word. Lily looked up at her father in disbelief. "She said she has to get her little boy." Ethan watched Emma straighten another stack of grocery bags before greeting the next customer with the same gentle voice she had somehow managed to keep through an impossible day. For years he had measured people by performance, discipline, and results. Yet standing there beneath the soft glow of fluorescent lights, surrounded by the scent of fresh bread and brewed coffee, he realized there was another measure of strength altogether. Sometimes the strongest person in the room was simply the one who kept showing kindness after life had given every reason to stop. The evening crowd slowly thinned as the sun slipped lower beyond the parking lot, painting the supermarket windows with warm amber light. Long shadows stretched across the polished floor while the constant rhythm of barcode scanners softened into a slower, steadier pace. Ethan stood quietly beside a display of fresh flowers, pretending to compare bouquets while his attention remained fixed on Register 6. Years of negotiating billion-dollar acquisitions had taught him how to observe people without being noticed. Tonight, however, he was not studying a business opportunity. He was trying to understand a woman whose quiet dignity refused to disappear even under the weight of exhaustion. Lily wandered a few feet away toward a rack of greeting cards before stopping beside a display filled with colorful balloons. She watched a little girl hug her grandfather after receiving a small stuffed bear from him, then looked back toward Emma with thoughtful eyes. "Daddy," she said softly, "does being grown up mean you have to cry where nobody can see you?" Ethan closed his eyes for a brief moment. "Sometimes people think it does." Lily frowned. "That sounds lonely." "It can be." She slipped her hand into his again. "I do not want people to be lonely." Her words settled over him with remarkable simplicity. Claire had often said that children carried truth without polishing it first. Adults buried truth beneath schedules, excuses, and fear. Children simply handed it to you and waited. Ethan realized he had spent years convincing himself that staying emotionally distant made him stronger. Standing beside his daughter, he was beginning to wonder whether it had only made him quieter. Across the store, Emma glanced at the clock mounted above the customer service desk. 6:42. Her breathing slowed for a second before she reached into the pocket of her apron and checked her phone. The screen lit briefly. Her expression fell almost immediately. She typed a short reply, locked the phone, and slipped it away before greeting another customer with the same patient smile. Ethan noticed the tiny tremble in her fingers as she handed back a receipt. Lily noticed it too. "She looks scared now," she whispered. Ethan followed Emma's eyes and saw them drift toward the entrance every few minutes, as though she expected someone to walk through the automatic doors. Instead, the manager returned carrying another clipboard. He stopped beside her register again. Emma listened quietly while he spoke. She nodded once, though disappointment washed across her face before she managed to hide it again. The manager walked away without looking back. Lily tugged gently at Ethan's sleeve. "Can we ask her what happened?" Ethan hesitated. Every instinct told him not to cross a line into someone else's private struggle. Yet another voice, one he had almost forgotten, reminded him that compassion often began with a simple willingness to listen. Before he could decide, Emma reached beneath the register and retrieved her phone once more. This time the screen remained visible just long enough for Ethan to notice a photograph filling the display. It showed the same smiling little boy from the picture beneath the monitor, wearing a baseball uniform much too large for his small shoulders, holding a trophy with unmistakable pride. The phone vibrated. Emma answered immediately, turning slightly away from customers. "Hi, Mrs. Dawson," she said quietly. She listened without interrupting. Her shoulders slowly lowered. "I know. I am so sorry. I am trying to leave as soon as I can. Please tell Noah I am coming." Her voice caught for only a second before she steadied it again. "Thank you for staying with him." She ended the call and stood completely still, staring at the dark screen for several silent moments. Then she placed the phone back into her pocket, took one slow breath, and greeted the next customer as though nothing had happened at all. Ethan looked down at Lily. She was already looking up at him with tears gathering in her eyes. "Daddy," she whispered. "I think her little boy is waiting for her, and nobody is helping either of them." For several long seconds, neither Ethan nor Lily moved. The automatic doors opened and closed as customers drifted into the warm evening carrying grocery bags and weekend plans, completely unaware that an invisible battle was unfolding only a few yards away. Ethan looked at his watch out of habit, then quietly lowered his wrist. For the first time in years, there was nowhere more important to be than exactly where he was standing. Lily gently squeezed his hand. "Daddy," she whispered, "can we help her get home?" Ethan looked down at his daughter, seeing not only the little girl standing before him, but also the woman Claire had hoped she would become. Compassion had never been something Claire tried to teach with speeches. She had taught it by stopping for stranded drivers, remembering birthdays no one else remembered, and sitting beside lonely people without asking how long it would take. Somehow Lily had carried all of those lessons forward. Ethan smiled softly. "Yes," he answered. "I think we can." Together they walked back toward Register 6. Emma was placing the final items into reusable shopping bags for an elderly couple. She thanked them warmly, wished them a peaceful evening, and waited until they had left before rubbing her tired eyes for only a second. When she looked up again and saw Ethan and Lily standing there, surprise crossed her face. "Did something else get left behind?" she asked politely. Ethan shook his head. "Actually, I think something almost did." Emma looked puzzled. "I am sorry." Ethan rested one hand lightly on the shopping cart. "You asked me earlier if everything in my order was all right." She nodded. "It was. You were wrong." Her expression grew concerned. "Was there a problem?" Ethan smiled gently. "Yes. I walked away without asking if you needed anything." Emma stared at him, unsure how to respond. For several moments, she simply blinked, as though the question itself felt unfamiliar. Finally, she offered the same answer so many people used when they no longer expected help. "That is very kind of you, but I am fine." Lily tilted her head. "You do not look fine." Emma looked down at the little girl and gave a faint laugh through tired eyes. "Children really do notice everything. Mommy said hearts can see things eyes miss," Lily replied. Emma's smile trembled. She lowered her gaze before quietly saying, "Your mommy sounds like someone I wish I could have met." Ethan nodded slowly. "So do I." Another silence settled between them, but this one felt different. It was not awkward. It was honest. Emma finally released a slow breath she seemed to have been holding for hours. "I appreciate your concern," she said softly. "It has simply been a difficult week." Ethan did not interrupt. He did not offer advice or assumptions. He simply listened. Emma looked around to make sure no customers were waiting before continuing in a barely audible voice. "My son has asthma. Usually we manage it well, but he became very sick a few days ago. He is staying with our neighbor while I work extra shifts because I cannot afford to lose any hours." Her fingers tightened around the edge of the register. "Every minute I stay here feels like I am letting him down. Every minute I leave early feels like I am risking the job that keeps food on our table." She forced another smile that disappeared almost as quickly as it appeared. "Sometimes it feels like there is no right choice." Ethan felt those words settle heavily inside him. They were not spoken with anger or bitterness. They carried only quiet exhaustion, the kind that comes from doing everything possible and still wondering whether it will ever be enough. Lily reached into the pocket of her yellow cardigan and carefully pulled out a small folded tissue decorated with tiny blue flowers. Without saying a word, she held it out to Emma. Emma accepted it with trembling fingers. One silent tear escaped despite every effort to stop it. She quickly wiped it away and whispered, "Thank you." Ethan realized then that the greatest gift his daughter had offered was not the tissue itself. It was permission for someone who had been carrying the world alone to finally believe that she did not have to carry it unseen. Emma folded the little blue tissue with remarkable care before placing it inside her apron pocket, as though it were something far more valuable than paper. She looked at Lily with grateful eyes that had not completely stopped trembling. "I think I will keep this," she said quietly. Lily smiled. "That is okay. I have another one at home." Ethan watched the exchange without saying a word. There were moments when money carried extraordinary influence, and there were moments when kindness accomplished something money never could. This was one of those moments. The overhead speaker announced that the store would be closing in 30 minutes. A few remaining shoppers hurried through the aisles while employees began straightening displays and collecting abandoned carts. Evening settled gently outside, and the last rays of sunlight painted the parking lot in soft shades of gold and orange. Emma glanced once more at the clock above customer service. 6:58. Her shoulders stiffened almost immediately. She reached for her phone again, hesitated, then slipped it back into her pocket without checking it. Ethan noticed. "You are worried," he said gently. Emma gave a small nod before looking away. "My neighbor has been wonderful, but she works the night shift at the hospital. She cannot stay much longer." Ethan asked quietly, "How old is your son?" A warmth finally crossed Emma's face that had nothing to do with forced politeness. "Noah is 6. He loves baseball, dinosaurs, and blueberry pancakes, even though he says he does not like blueberries." Lily giggled. "That sounds silly." Emma laughed softly for the first time that evening, and the sound surprised even her. "It is. He picks every blueberry out one by one, then asks if he can have them after breakfast." Ethan smiled, imagining the little boy in the photograph. "He sounds like quite a character." "He is everything to me," Emma answered without hesitation. The words came so naturally that they carried no performance, only truth. Then the smile slowly faded. "Last week his doctor changed one of his medications because his breathing has become more difficult during allergy season. Insurance approved part of it, but the new inhaler costs much more than I expected. Between rent, groceries, and missing hours whenever Noah has appointments, every paycheck disappears before it even reaches my account." She looked embarrassed for having said so much. "I am sorry. I should not be telling customers my problems." Ethan shook his head gently. "You are not complaining. You are telling the truth." She lowered her eyes again. Sometimes those feel like the same thing. Before Ethan could answer, her phone vibrated once more. This time she looked immediately. The color drained from her face. She answered the call with shaking fingers. "Mrs. Dawson?" Her expression grew tense as she listened. "Is he having trouble breathing again?" Lily instinctively reached for her father's hand. Emma closed her eyes briefly. "Please tell Noah I am on my way. I will leave as soon as I can. Thank you. Thank you for staying with him." She ended the call and pressed the phone gently against her forehead, taking one slow breath before opening her eyes again. The tears did not fall this time. They simply remained there, held back by determination alone. Ethan spoke carefully. "Go home." Emma looked startled. "I cannot. If I leave without permission, I could lose this job. And if you stay?" She looked toward the dark screen of her phone where Noah's smiling face still reflected faintly in the glass. "Then my little boy waits even longer." At that exact moment, Lily quietly stepped closer to Emma and slipped her small stuffed rabbit into her hands. Emma looked down in surprise. "Sweetheart, I cannot take this." Lily smiled with complete certainty. "His name is Oliver. Whenever I miss Mommy, I hug him first. He makes waiting feel shorter. Maybe Noah can borrow him until you get home." Emma stared at the little rabbit for several silent seconds before another tear finally escaped. This time she did not wipe it away. She simply held the toy gently against her heart, and for the first time all evening, she no longer looked completely alone. Emma held the little rabbit as though it carried something far greater than soft fabric and cotton filling. Her fingers brushed gently across one worn ear before she looked back at Lily with eyes full of quiet gratitude. "I promise I will take very good care of Oliver," she whispered. Lily nodded with complete confidence. "I know you will. He likes helping people." For the first time since Ethan had entered the supermarket, Emma smiled without forcing it. It was small, almost fragile, but completely genuine. The overhead lights reflected softly in her eyes, replacing exhaustion with something that had been missing all evening. Hope. It did not erase her worries. It simply reminded her that kindness still existed. Just then, The store manager appeared once more, carrying a stack of paperwork. He glanced briefly toward Ethan, recognizing him only as another customer lingering after checkout. "Emma," he said, "when your register closes, I still need those inventory reports finished before you leave." Emma hesitated. "Mr. Collins, my son is waiting for me." "I was hoping," he interrupted with a tired sigh. "Everyone has somewhere they would rather be. Please finish the reports." He walked away before she could answer. Lily looked up at her father. She did not complain. She did not argue. She simply asked, "Daddy, is being in charge supposed to make people forget how to be kind?" Ethan felt the question settle heavily inside him. He remembered the hundreds of employees who worked across his own companies. He thought about every manager he had ever promoted, every leadership seminar he had funded, every speech he had given about excellence. Suddenly one thought became impossible to ignore. Success meant very little if kindness disappeared along the way. He looked toward Emma, who had quietly begun organizing receipts while trying not to look at the clock again. "Wait here with Lily for 1 minute," he said gently. Emma looked confused. "Sir, you really do not have to." Ethan smiled politely. "I know." Then he walked calmly toward the customer service desk where Mr. Collins was reviewing paperwork. There was no anger in Ethan's voice, no accusation, only quiet respect. "Excuse me," he said. Mr. Collins looked up. "Can I help you?" "I hope so. I wanted to ask about your employee at Register 6. The manager immediately became cautious. "Is there a problem with her service?" Ethan shook his head. "Quite the opposite. She has shown remarkable professionalism despite carrying more than most people realize." Mr. Collins folded his arms. "Emma is dependable. We simply have staffing shortages tonight." Ethan nodded. "I understand operational challenges. I deal with them every day." The manager gave a polite smile. "Then you know how difficult these situations can be." "I do," Ethan replied. "I also know that good employees are not difficult to replace because of their skills. They are difficult to replace because of their character." Mr. Collins remained silent. Ethan continued calmly. "A person who greets every customer with respect while worrying about a sick child is demonstrating something far more valuable than efficiency. She is demonstrating integrity." The manager's expression softened slightly. Ethan did not reveal his name, his company, or his position. He had no interest in winning the conversation through status. He simply spoke as one parent to another human being. If someone like Emma believes her workplace has no room for compassion, eventually she will stop believing her best is enough. That would be a loss for everyone. Mr. Collins glanced across the store toward Register 6, where Emma was carefully helping an elderly customer load groceries into a cart despite the long day written across her face. He remained quiet for several moments. Finally, he sighed, not with irritation this time, but with reflection. "I suppose I have been looking at schedules instead of people." Ethan smiled gently. "It happens more often than we realize." As Ethan walked back toward Lily and Emma, he noticed something unexpected. Mr. Collins was already following a few steps behind him, carrying the unfinished inventory folder in one hand. He stopped beside Emma, looked at the little rabbit she was holding against her apron, then quietly closed the folder. "Emma," he said softly, "go home to Noah? We will finish the paperwork tomorrow. Family comes first tonight." Emma stared at him in complete disbelief, unable to find words, while Lily looked up at her father with the brightest smile he had seen in years. The room had changed. The same people who once looked through him were now watching every movement, every word, every quiet breath. Logan Carter did not celebrate the shift. He simply placed his worn folder on the table and waited. "You are confident now?" the prosecutor asked. "No," Logan replied softly. "I am prepared." "You think preparation changes the truth?" "No, it reveals it." The courtroom fell quiet again. Outside, rain tapped against the tall windows of the old courthouse, carrying the scent of wet pavement into the aging wooden halls. The fluorescent lights buzzed above, the clock on the wall clicked forward, and the small American flag near the judge's bench stood perfectly still. Logan looked at the photograph inside his folder, the only personal item he had brought with him. It was a picture of him and his daughter, taken years earlier on a simple afternoon at a local park. Her smile reminded him why he had chosen patience over anger, dignity over pride, and truth over revenge. "Mr. Carter," Judge Isabella Reeves said, her voice calmer than before, You have shown remarkable control throughout these proceedings. Logan nodded. My daughter taught me something, Your Honor. The judge looked curious. What is that? That being right is not enough. You must also remain kind while proving it. A few people in the gallery lowered their eyes. They remembered the laughter from the first day. They remembered how quickly they had judged a man because of his old jacket, his quiet voice, and the fact that he stood alone. But character has a way of surviving moments when appearances fail. The prosecutor stepped forward again, holding a new document. There is still one matter we need to address. Logan looked at him. Go ahead. The prosecutor hesitated. It was only for a second, but everyone noticed. The confidence that once filled his voice was gone. The vehicle owner has submitted a statement. The paper moved across the table. She confirms you were not stealing the truck. Silence. Complete silence. The kind of silence that does not come from fear, but from realization. Judge Reeves read the statement carefully. Her expression changed slowly. Mr. Carter, she said, why did you not mention this earlier? Logan looked toward the window. The rain continued falling gently over the town where he had spent years rebuilding his life. Because I wanted the truth to stand on its own. Those words stayed in the room. They were simple, almost too simple, yet everyone felt their weight. The judge placed the document down and removed her glasses. Many people come into this courtroom wanting to win. She paused. But you came here wanting to be heard. Logan said nothing. He did not need to. The respect he had searched for was no longer something he had to request. It was already there. Later that afternoon, when Logan walked outside the courthouse, the rain had stopped. His old truck waited at the curb, covered with tiny drops of water reflecting the afternoon light. His daughter ran toward him, holding her school backpack tightly. Daddy, did you win? She asked. Logan smiled and knelt beside her. We found the truth. She hugged him without another question. And across the courthouse steps, the people who once saw only a struggling single father finally understood something they had forgotten. Real strength does not announce itself. Real dignity does not demand attention. Sometimes, the quietest person in the room carries the greatest story. And sometimes, all it takes is one moment of truth to make the entire world stand still. The morning light entered through the old kitchen window of Daniel Harper's small farmhouse, painting thin golden lines across the wooden floor. The coffee maker hummed softly, the scent of fresh coffee mixing with the smell of worn pine walls and yesterday's dinner. For most people it was just another quiet morning. But for Daniel, quiet had become the language of survival. His daughter Emily sat at the table, finishing her homework while her father packed her lunch with the same careful attention he gave everything in life. You remembered my favorite sandwich. I always remember. Even when you are tired, especially when I am tired. Emily smiled, because children often notice what the world ignores. They see love hiding inside ordinary moments. Daniel had spent years being overlooked. A single father working repair jobs around town, wearing the same faded work jacket, driving the same old pickup truck, and carrying responsibilities that no one else could see. But kindness has a way of leaving footprints, even when nobody is watching. The previous week, Daniel had helped a mysterious woman named Claire Whitmore repair the damaged roof of an old family property outside town. He thought he was simply helping someone who needed a hand. He did not know that the quiet woman carrying paint cans and old photographs was connected to one of the largest agricultural companies in the country. He did not know that her family name was recognized across America. And he certainly did not know that his simple act of respect had changed the way she saw the world. Later that afternoon, Daniel arrived at the old farmhouse property to finish the repairs. The wind moved gently through the fields, carrying the sound of distant birds and the soft creaking of the wooden porch. Claire was standing there, looking at the restored windows and freshly repaired boards. You really came back. Daniel looked confused. You needed the work finished. She smiled quietly. Most people would have asked what they could get from me. Daniel placed his tools down. People need help before they need anything else. The words were simple, but they carried the weight of a man who had lived them. Claire looked away for a moment, holding back emotion she was not used to showing. For years, she had been surrounded by people who valued her name, her company, and her wealth. Very few cared about the person behind it all. Daniel never asked, never searched for an opportunity, never treated her differently. He only saw a person who needed help. That kind of grace was rare. As the afternoon sun lowered over the fields, Claire finally revealed a small part of her truth. Daniel, there is something you should know about me. He stopped tightening the final screw and looked toward her. I am not just someone who owns this little property. She took a breath. My family owns Whitmore Agricultural Group. The silence that followed was not uncomfortable. It was meaningful. Daniel looked at her, then at the old farmhouse, then back at her again. That explains why the land is so beautiful. Claire almost laughed. She expected surprise. She expected questions. She expected admiration. But Daniel only noticed the land, the people who worked it, the history behind it, the things money could not replace. In that moment, Claire understood something powerful. Respect does not come from titles. Dignity does not come from bank accounts. And the strongest people are often the ones who never need to prove their worth. Before Daniel left, Claire handed him a small envelope. What is this? He asked. Something I believe you earned. Daniel shook his head gently. I did not help you for a reward. Claire nodded. I know. That is exactly why I want you to have it. He held the envelope but did not open it. The evening sky turned orange above the quiet fields. And somewhere between the fading sunlight and the sound of the old farmhouse settling, a new chapter quietly began. Because sometimes the greatest miracles do not arrive with noise. Sometimes they arrive through a person who simply chooses kindness when nobody is watching. And soon, Daniel Harper would discover that one small act of grace had reached much farther than he ever imagined.